So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to a battle between Linden and Mirkwood, and the reason why I wanted to show this one in particular is because it is somewhat topical to a few discussions that have been had lately within the sort of testing realm of the Discord, and we'll go through the army compositions now and it will become clear as to the purpose of this as the battle goes along. So first of all, I am playing as Linden, so I think this is the first time I've played Linden at least in a 1 versus 1 capacity in the sort of current test build anyway, and I have a front line of I think 4 units of the 4 Linden archers, so they are, you know, lighter archers, but they are also cheaper, which is kind of a necessity when you're being the elves, simply because if you try and load up on all of the most expensive skirmishes that Linden have to offer, you're not going to be able to go toe to toe too easily with Mirkwood, at least not if you do it in the most traditional. At least not if you sort of stack your archers at the front. There are ways that you can get around it, and we might go into that a little bit later on in the video. But for the time being, I decided to bring these units of 4 units of archers, simply because I was trying to do something quite similar to that I did with Imladris against Rune. I was curious to see if this build would manage to stand up to the very powerful skirmishes of Mirkwood. Speaking of which, I have 5 units of the Harlinden infantry, and this is kind of a no-brainer in this matchup, at least that's what I thought at the start of yesterday, simply because they are the only shielded melee infantry you have available to you as Linden, and Linden's lack of armour can be a real problem against Mirkwood, especially simply because their skirmishes are so strong. And then back here we can also see that I have 1 unit of Harlinden Guard, simply because I did have enough money left over to afford 1 of the slightly better units of archers when I had kind of finished my composition. And these guys are shielded, but they still won't stand up too much better to the Mirkwood skirmishers than the equivalent 4 Linden archers. However, they are better at returning fire, as it were. They are more effective archers in their own right, and they can also act as melee infantry, of course, with those spears. But the primary difference between this and the army that I used against Rune with Imladris is the fact that Linden do have javelins available to them. So I've got a couple of units of Mythlon Marines, which hopefully I want to keep out of Mirkwood skirmishes for as long as possible, then move them forward to support my infantry line, because the Harlinden infantry are the only melee infantry units that I have. So to withstand the Woodland Realms infantry, if they brought some of their high tier stuff, I am going to need the support of these very nice Linden javelins. And moving out to both flanks, we can see that I did something similar to this with Imladris before, but obviously this time I'm using the equivalent Linden unit. So I've got the Wardens of Harlinden over here, so a horse archer unit. These will primarily be used early on to try and zone out any possible Woodland Realms cavalry, and then if that is done, then hopefully I will be able to use them to assist the skirmish against the Woodland Realms. Of course, based on foot archers alone, I'm not going to be able to compete too easily with Mirkwood. And then back here, just supporting them, I've got a unit of 4 Linden scouts. They can hide anywhere, so they can be used for ambush purposes, but I'm going to be very aggressive in this battle, because sitting back against Mirkwood for the most part is not the wisest idea. And the 4 Linden scouts, they won't win any cavalry contests really, but they will support my horse archers and they will block any advancing Woodland Realms cavalry and give me a chance to get away. And if I can be aggressive and get into the Woodland Realms archers with them, then all the better. I also have the same situation on the other side, so some 4 Linden scouts and some wardens, and then in the centre over here, if I get into the right position, we can also see that I have a unit of the Noldorin Horse Lords. This is something that I definitely do have over Mirkwood in this matchup, the Elder Kingsguard, or the new name for them. You know, I'm not looking forward to trying to pronounce some of these new Mirkwood names that they've got going on, but the Noldorin Horse Lords are definitely the single best cavalry unit between the two factions. They are very powerful. They're also more resilient than most other Linden units to missile fire, so they should be able to tank some of that very deadly Mirkwood skirmish fire. And hopefully I can do some serious damage with these guys, because they are the most expensive unit I have on the field. But now we shall move on to Mirkwood's army, so if we just skip across the field here, we will be able to move on to my opponent's army, and that is J-Monster. So he is playing as the Elves of Mirkwood. And going through his army, of course, Mirkwood do have the skirmish advantage over Linden, and it is this which is going to be in the spotlight here more than anything. So we have at the front here some units of Heer E Peng, so their unit, well, their name has been slightly changed, and obviously they are going to be more effective at skirmishing with my lighter archers, and they are also, I think, well, based on a match that I had later on in the day, I kind of assume that the Heer E Peng are significantly better in a skirmish fight than the Harlinden Guard, and the Harlinden Guard are also quite expensive, so going heavy on skirmishes against Mirkwood is quite a gambit, which can pay off, but in this situation I did want to sort of rush down the Mirkwood lines as quickly as possible. In the middle here he's got some Heer E Orth, Again, this is going to be a nightmare to pronounce all of these. But yeah, the equivalent melee infantry, so again, quite similar to my, but actually more elite, I think, than my Harlinden Guard, so I might be in for a bit of a rough time of it. But we shall see. And then over here on the two flanks, we also have the Hir'en-ek, so the name of the spearmen has not changed. And they will be good at holding back, and I've got to be careful, obviously, because if my cavalry gets entangled in these elite elven spears, I'm going to be in trouble. Same here with the Thrand-en-Erin. It gets worse, trust me. But yeah, we also have some of them. There might also be some hidden units, because Mirkwood, of course, have got quite a few units that can hide. We've also got some more of the En-Erin on the side, so he's got a lot of spears, which I'm going to need to be careful of with my cavalry, because I've spent a fair amount on my cavalry, and it is going to be quite important to me as the battle goes on. We've also got the elite two-hander swords of Mirkwood, the Hir-e-Lang. So again, my Harlinden infantry is probably going to struggle against all of this very nice Mirkwood infantry. Again, getting into a melee is not something Mirkwood, it's not their plan A, as it were, but they do have the units as elves, of course. They do have the quality to mix it. And I'm going to need to use my javelins if I'm going to stand a chance in melee. He's also got his lancers over here, so we have the Rochibin en Amon Lank, which are the previously called the Elder Pathfinder, so they are the slightly more fragile version of the Mirkwood cavalry, but off the charge they are still very deadly. But provided I can use my horse skirmishers to good effect, I should be able to skirmish them down from afar. Then over here we've got another unit of the same, and he does have some hidden units, but of course we can't see them as of yet, but we shall begin. Now, obviously, the onus is going to be on me to move forward, and immediately I'm going to be charging forward my Harlinden infantry, trying to get my archers into range, and then swinging out wide with my cavalry. That is something that I've noticed. Going wide in the vast majority of situations will help you. Going narrow hinders you unless you have a very solid defensive setup. It's not enough to go half-heartedly into a defensive situation. You need to build your army entirely around being defensive, otherwise you're much better off trying to cover the map as best you can. And obviously the Hir-e-Pang are going to start firing here. We'll go into my lines as they advance, and this is one of the things you're going to notice as Linden. You're going to take some horrendous casualties from these accurate elven archers. Now Mirkwood are more of an extreme example of this, simply because their archers are so deadly. But even Lorien and Imladris will be able to do this to an extent to Linden. And it's worth bearing in mind as well that for a lot of people, Linden are one of the most powerful factions in the game at the moment. It's just against Mirkwood they do have a bit of a sticking point, it would seem. Having said that, my infantry has managed to get to the lines relatively intact. I mean, some of them have taken some losses, but the shields on the Harlinden infantry and the limited amount of arrow fire they've taken have helped me here. Meanwhile, if we look over there, you can see that I'm sort of running off. Several of my Wardens of Harlinden, however, fell before the Woodman Realm skirmishers. You can see that the Thurn-en Tower, which are a ranger unit, I believe, were hidden, and the body piercing on them is going to devastate my cavalry. So again, I'm trying to pressure the flanks, but as soon as I get anywhere close, my cavalry just gets melted. On the other side, however, things are going more in my favour. I've got my Noldorin horse lords into his Amon Lank, and combined with my 4 Linden scouts, that's going to be a very one-sided fight. You can see I'm actually using fire arrows. That was more of a mistake than anything else, but I was trying to keep my rapidly disintegrating line from falling apart too severely. So if we sort of slow things down a little bit here so we can get a nice look at what's going on. One problem that I do have, of course, is that my Harlinden infantry here are not going to be able to win this fight all on their own. The Hir-e-Orth are going to be able to beat them 1-to-1, and they also outnumber my front line at this point. And I could have brought more melee infantry, and Linden, of course, do have some very good melee infantry. They have the Noldorin Blade Masters, and they also have the Mithlond Blade Masters. But my problem was there, they would be just a magnet for the Woodland Realms archers. Now fortunately I do have my javelins, and they're getting into position, and they're going to get some nice volleys off into the rear lines here of Mirkwood. You can even see I do actually have my 4 Linden scouts in behind here. But unfortunately for me, we also have these Atirith and Amon Lank, which are previously the Elder Royal Guard, so we have more elite archers that were hidden back here that have now revealed themselves. So more and more skirmish fire is going to be being poured into my army here, and Linden, needless to say, are not the most durable to this sort of thing. I think it's... well, I'll give my thoughts on it afterwards, but here we can see that the Hir-e-Lang are also taking some archer fire and some javelin fire. And also we can see that I'm trying to get into the Woodland Realm skirmishes. If I can try and limit the amount of fire I'm taking, I might be able to pull this out with my cavalry. And again, the Wardens of Harlinden managing to charge into the Thurn-en Tower. And also the Noldorin Horse Lords chasing off that one cavalryman, but I am going to swing them back around because I do need to start charging into the rear of this Woodland Realms line. I should start calling them Mirkwood really. But here we can see the Hir Lang are coming forward. So the more damaging variant of the Woodland Realms infantry is going to be chasing off my Wardens of Harlingen. And you can see here that over here I'm doing a reasonably good job on this flank. Against the spears, my melee infantry is doing a good job, but it's here in the middle against the Hir Orth, so the melee infantry of Mirkwood, which this is a higher tier unit than the Harlingen infantry, I believe. Anyway, the Harlingen infantry and the Eldar Makar of Imladris are quite similar in unit, well, at least in function, whereas the Hir Orth are slightly better, I think, mainly, well, in terms of looks, they certainly would appear to be that way in terms of armour. But one thing that I would say is they have quite remarkably crumbled in the face of this, especially when they've been backed up by these sort of lower tier Mirkwood spears. And at this point the cavalry on this flank has been melted by the Mirkwood archers, and this is going to allow these Amon Lank cavalry to start getting into my javelins, and without my javelins I've got absolutely no hope of holding this front line together. You can see that already Mirkwood is starting to pour through the centre where they've created this gap, and they're going to be able to start getting into my archers back here, which are providing some decent overwatch fire at this point in the battle. Mirkwood themselves as elves don't exactly hold up too well under sustained arrow fire, but for the most part they're able to kill enemy archers before that becomes a significant problem for them. You can see over here I'm still sort of trying to throw javelins. In fact, I think this unit of javelins is out of ammunition, so I'm going to commit them to the melee pretty soon. And you can see over here that the Hir Lang are chasing off my Noldorin Horse Lords, which are still in pretty good health, to be honest with you, so that unit there is doing very well. Problem is here I'm not going to be able to get any hammer and anvils, because as soon as I get anywhere close with my cavalry, especially with this unit of Amon Lank back here, my Wardens of Harlingen are going to very quickly fall apart. The Peng have taken some pretty significant losses back here though. Well, actually no, this unit's still got 97, so I lied. They're doing very well still. Now the Hir Lang are also turning around, and they're going to be able to get in behind what's left of my Harlingen infantry, and over here, despite the fact that initially it was looking pretty good against the Hir Ek, it's starting to fall apart now. So I didn't have enough melee infantry here to really take it to Mirkwood in the melee fight. I could have if I brought more, of course, but then the problem would have been I could have brought less archers, but again, we'll go through that after the battle has concluded. You can see that these Mithlon Marines, I saw the fact that these Hir Orth were getting into my archers, so I had to block them, because without my archers this is going to be over very quickly. And this unit of Mithlon Marines is going to try and hold this unit of Mirkwood melee infantry at bay. You can see back here as well, I think this unit of Mithlon Marines actually still has some ammunition, indeed they do. But this unit of Amon Lank has charged into them a couple of times. They're now pretty bloodied up, and you can see that now the end tower are starting to pour fire into the javelins. And then over here you can see that Hir Ek holding very well. Obviously spears are very good at holding the line. They haven't managed to kill as much Harlingen infantry as the sort of melee infantry in the centre of Mirkwood's line, but more significantly my Harlingen infantry haven't been able to make any significant inroads to these more elite Mirkwood spears. And then back here you can see that I have managed to get my Noldorin Horse Lords into the back lines. I'm trying to charge into these archers as much as possible, but there is a limited amount of damage that this single unit of cavalry is going to be able to do, and also many of the Mirkwood skirmishers are going to be turning their attentions onto the Noldorin Horse Lords, and of course having 2 HP isn't going to help them against the saturation fire that's going to be coming their way. Meanwhile, the one part of the front line where I seem to be doing pretty decently, things are about to turn around over here as well, because the Hir Lang are coming in. They're going to be able to recharge my Harlingen infantry. That's a weird kind of juddering effect there, but nonetheless, the Mirkwood infantry is going to be able to recharge me, and that's going to pretty quickly lead to the complete collapse of my front line. And then over here you can see the Mithlon Marines trying to put up a decent fight in melee, but again, against dedicated quality units of melee infantry like the Hir Orth, they're not going to be able to nix it here. They can be used as support troops when their ammunition is out, but one-to-one they're not going to be able to do a fantastic job. And over here you can see that the one part of the line that was looking pretty ropey for Mirkwood has now been reinforced by another unit of these lower tier spears. You can see I'm really doing my best to get these Noldorin Horse Lords into a good position. There's still 24 of them, only one of them has fallen. But these Peng are blocking the way. I'm trying to get some rear charges onto this line, because without this cluster of Harlingen infantry, Mirkwood are just going to be able to swamp forward. You can see the percentages are not great. I am 22% behind. Now my Noldorin Horse Lords have stopped, although, let's go back up to 1 speed. So I'm going to charge forward. Again, being completely surrounded over here, I didn't have the melee infantry. There goes the enemy general then. Peppered down by my archer line. My archer line, ironically, is the one... Well, actually, no, if you look at it, they're looking pretty battered as well. The Harlinden Guard are still in good health, but other than that... Again, trying to sort of shoot down these men before they can reach the lines, which is all my archers can really do at this point. Look here, this unit of Mythlon Marines is getting completely overrun. This unit of Harlinden infantry over here is wavering now that the spears are starting to munch down the line. Mirkwood still have skirmishers available to them, although most of them are sort of focusing down my Noldor and Horse Lords. You can see that since we last saw them, they have lost half their unit, and this is because their HP are now gone, and of course that means that unshielded, relatively low armour, that's going to mean they're going to fall very quickly. I'm trying to charge into the Hirti Lung, and I did cause them to start wavering, so this unit of Lung is looking pretty bloodied up now. And that is going to be pretty much the end of my Noldor and Horse Lords. My general is still alive, but there are only 5 of them left. So there's going to be a limited amount I'm going to be able to do with them. My front line has completely collapsed under the weight of the superior quality Mirkwood infantry in this case. And over here we have the Hirti Orth, which are still slowly munching their way through these Mythlon Marines. And then over here you can see that I did actually manage to break one of the units of Orth. I'm probably saying that completely wrong. This unit of Lung is getting into my archers now, and they're still in relatively good health, so things are looking very bad for me. My general's still alive though, the bearded elf. There he is. He's the only one left actually. Well no, there's 2 of them. Nope, there's just the one. And you can see that the breaking of my infantry is now happening. It's pretty much all over. The Harlinden Guard are getting focused down by what's left of the Mirkwood skirmishers, and you can pretty much tell that a chain rout is going to be heading my way pretty soon. So I've managed to kill 60% of the Mirkwood army near enough, whereas all of my army are going to be put to the sword quite efficiently.
Our foolish general has thrown his life away.
Into the spears. I believe I decided to throw all my archers into melee at this point. Dying by a sword is better than dying by an arrow. And here we can see obviously Forlinden Archer's not going to be able to stand up to Mirkwood's infantry, and again this unit of spears is still in relatively good health. I mean 72 men left in the unit. We've also got the Orth that is still doing relatively well, and of course the flooding fourth of the Mirkwood infantry. And there goes my army. So that wasn't necessarily that close. I got thoroughly trounced really, but you can see that I was, you know, just over 400 kills short, and as far as the men deployed, it was relatively even army numbers. I had slightly less because I had slightly more in the way of cavalry, but even so. If we have a look at what got my kills, obviously my Noldor and Horse Lords were my star performers. They were the only ones that were really able to stand up to the Mirkwood skirmishers without evaporating under the fire. Obviously this unit of well, as you can see, this unit of Mythlon Marines also did pretty decently. They were able to unleash their entire javelin load onto the Mirkwood infantry line, and they did a decent job, and they did actually manage to make that part of the infantry engagement relatively favourable for me until obviously I started to run afoul of Mirkwood's superior infantry in this case, and then obviously the Harlinden Guard getting over 100 as well, because they were relatively untouched by the Mirkwood skirmishers. If they had decided to target them sooner, obviously they would have fallen away. But my archers weren't really the greatest concern for Mirkwood in this fight. He shut down my cavalry relatively quickly, and that was really the tool that I needed in order to win this one. And unfortunately for me, Linden's cavalry is less durable than the Imladris one, and that is ultimately why this didn't work. I feel like even Imladris would probably struggle to make a build like that work, but they would at least not get trashed quite so comprehensively. And this is really one of the things that has been noted. Linden seemed to match up quite poorly to Mirkwood for the most part, as long as both players sort of pick an army that is appropriate. Like if the Mirkwood player picks an army that is appropriate for the situation, they will have a pretty significant advantage going into the fight. And I'm not really sure that much can be done about that, simply because changing that too much would involve changing the identities of either Linden or Mirkwood, or both as a faction. Mirkwood are meant to be very effective skirmishers, and Linden are meant to not have a lot of armour but be sort of very skillful. It is a bit of a conundrum. One thing that I have noticed with regards to the elves in general is the combination of very long range and very accurate archers tends to be what causes situations like this. Against Linden, you might think, well, according to this, I should take a full archer army, and that will do a decent job. Obviously, you could do the same with, for example, Dale, but Dale lack the same sort of range and accuracy sort of combination that the elves have. They are very effective skirmishers, but it's more due to the fact that they can absorb more punishment as well as deliver a balanced amount of damage and accuracy, whereas the elves, they are very much front loaded on the damage dealing side of things. All of the elves in general will do pretty badly if it turns into a fight of attrition and they don't have the numbers to very quickly whittle down the enemy skirmishers. So it's a strange one. I mean, I've got to be honest, I don't like fighting the elves. I mean, I am saying that because I spent all of yesterday getting absolutely murdered by the elves at every corner. I lost every single fight I was in. This is probably the one that I performed best in, and I was 40% behind. I mean, that is arguable. The last one where I was playing Gondor against Linden wasn't too bad, but even so, I'm not the best player at Reforged. I know that, but I'm not that bad. That's what worries me slightly. It's, if a new player was to come in and try and face the elves as they are now, that would worry me, simply because they would get absolutely trashed. And I did one of the directives that was issued, one of the things that was said back when this patch was envisioned, was that the elves were going to be made hard to play, and at the moment they are by far and away the easiest factions to play. The fact that I was able to beat Creed 3 times in a row when I was using Imladris, and seeing as Creed is the champion of the Discord, kind of shows something. Creed is a better player than I am. It's possible that I could beat him, but I beat him 3 times in a row using Imladris, and honestly, I was using an army that was less and less appropriate each time, and I was still able to eke out a victory. This is another, obviously, elf versus elf. Linden versus Mirkwood is a microcosm which I don't think will get solved, simply because it would involve mutilating the faction focus too much. But the elves in general are a subject of discussion at the moment, and I'm not sure where it will end up. There has been talk of reducing the unit sizes, which is possibly something that could help, but you would also be risking then, it's a very fine balance between making the elves as strong as they are currently, which is not grossly overpowered, but it is easy to play, shall we say. And then if you take too many men away from them, they're just going to be useless, and no one will like playing them because people will just rush you down and destroy you every time. So it is a conundrum, and I really don't envy trying to balance all of this out, but this is probably the main challenge that remains, if I'm honest. Now, we'll see where it leads. Obviously, I'm not a sore loser. I was roundly beaten all of yesterday, and rightly so. I was outplayed in every battle I was in, but I would be interested to see where this leads with regards to how the elves in particular work, because they are a very integral part of Reforged. Obviously, having the smaller armies, the more quality focused armies, is something which kind of sets it apart from the standard Medieval 2 and a lot of other Total War games, because most of the time armies are of similar sizes, whereas the elves, they're always going to be at a numbers disadvantage, and they need to have quality to make up for that. Regardless, I think I've rambled on enough. So yeah, if you have any sort of suggestions, I guess you should go to the Discord. But yeah, I mean, the testing is ongoing, as they say. But yes, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.